It's an ambush.
Oh my God, it's an ambush!
It's an ambush!
Of course!
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this decidedly unplanned ambush stream. Of course, it wouldn't be an ambush stream if it was planned very well, would it? But, yes, I am broadcasting now on YouTube and on X. So if you happen to be on X or want to watch on X, say hello if you can. I don't know how people say hello on X. I don't know that I've ever watched a stream all the way through on X to know how to comment on there. But if you do, apparently I will be able to see it. Yeah, I hope everybody's having a good Wednesday evening. I happen to be kind of bored, kind of restless. I've got that sort of end-of-year, sort of loosey-goosey, what the heck kind of sensation. And work is thankfully very quiet the last couple of days, so I don't have a lot of brain energy I have to put into planning ahead for that, just the routine stuff each day, which still requires me to be up at 4 in the morning, but it's manageable. But anyway, who's joining me on this ambush stream? Shady Grin, hey, popping in to give it a like. Appreciate it, but I may hit the hey before you go to live, so catch us on the flip side. Okay, well, get good sleep, Shady. It'll be here for you when you get back. And Plague Trucker Zach is having some issues, I guess. San, good evening. Mike R, good evening. The Alexander, good evening. Cynic, good evening to you. Who else is here? John Trioxon, good evening. Vader35, good evening. The Best Remy, good evening. The Dead Man, good evening to you. The Blakester, good evening to you. Adam Myers, how you doing? Who else? Robert Pincus, good evening. Unfair Ophelia, good evening. Who else is here? Advocatus Diabli, hello. Tier Alexander, good evening. Attack Alpaca, good evening to you. Kiro Soldier, thank you so much for the smiley, happy Dogcat Fox. Oh, a Dogcat Fox.
Wowie, wow, wow.
Oh my gosh, there's a Shadowclaw Dogcat Fox. Ooh. And then thank you, Alan Thyler, for the We're Number One Dogcat Fox. Oh, Dogcat Fox.
Wow. Wow, wow.
Ooh, there's a Sinatra Says Dogcat Fox. Oh my gosh, we got so many Dogcat Foxes here. Alice Morgan, good evening. Oh, there you go, Alice Morgan. Who else is here? Santa Mutant 2099, good evening. Non-Vitae Rex, hello. And Brandon Foster, good evening to you. And anybody else I missed, anybody lurking, anybody in the future, good evening. Okay, so about a week ago, actually it was just a week ago, oral arguments were undertaken, I should say, in front of the Supreme Court regarding a Tennessee ban on transgender surgery or gender affirming treatment, medical treatment. So yeah, that was last Wednesday. I listened to a bit of the oral arguments at the time, specifically when the lawyer defending defending the procedures but against the ban in Tennessee was speaking before the court, and there was some interesting things said at that time. But just for some context, reading from a Fox News article from last week, the Supreme Court began hearing oral arguments for the high-profile case involving Tennessee's ban on transgender medical procedures for minors on Wednesday. That's last Wednesday. And one expert is saying the historic case shows, quote, the pendulum is swinging, unquote. The case, U.S. v. Skirmetti, will decide whether Tennessee's ban on transgender medical procedures is constitutional and could impact whether states will enact more bans and allow individuals to sue medical providers. Let's see. As oral arguments commenced Wednesday morning, supporters and opponents of gender transition treatments gathered outside the SCOTUS building holding transgender pride flags and Kids Health Matters. Over the course of more than 2 hours, the justices listened to each side present their arguments and ask questions. The court's ruling could affect other current legal fights over transgender rights, including bathroom access and participation in scholastic sports. It could also serve as a legal template for future disputes involving the LGBTQ community, even though only one letter out of that even really matters, and whether sexual orientation is a, quote, protected class, unquote, that deserves the same rights that involve a person's race and national origin. Let's see. The appellate courts have consistently upheld state bans on gender-affirming care for minors, though some lower court rulings have been overturned on appeal. So that's sort of the general just around the case. A decision is probably not going to be forthcoming until sometime next year. But a couple of days before those oral arguments started, so this is about last Monday or Tuesday, I think, CNN apparently, I just discovered this this evening, CNN interviewed the lawyer defending the transgender medical procedures, who is themselves the first trans attorney to ever appear before the Supreme Court for argumentation. Now, you might ask yourself, Scribe, why are we going to listen to this? And by the way, it is just a sort of podcast kind of thing. There's no visuals to it, so we'll just be listening to it. Well, here's the thing. This subject, as many of you may or may not know, is one of the more controversial things going on in the modern zeitgeist. Medical surgery and experimentation, I would say, on children, in particular, to change their bodies, body chemistry, physically and otherwise, likely in a permanent fashion, depending on how it goes. But then I also have to say to myself, why listen to this? I already have my opinion. Well, I also have to ask myself, what is the point of this channel? Now, there could be a very short answer to that question or a much longer answer to that question. But one of the foundationary blocks of this channel, as far as I'm concerned, is listening to ideas that I may reflexively disagree with, but wanting to at least understand the argument being made, and learning how to entertain an idea without necessarily having to accept it. So, this might be one of the bigger challenges for me on that score, because I'm quite vehemently opposed to the idea of messing around with children in that way, or in any particular way. But yeah, so this is an interview with the lawyer arguing against the bans. This is a CNN interview. It's just a podcast. There's no visuals to it, so you're not going to be missing anything if you're listening home at work or otherwise. So let's get to that here real quick and switch it over a bit. And I'll put up, what's a good overlay for this? Well, I've only got 2. I really need to have, like, another neutral overlay or something. Do I have a neutral overlay? Hold on a moment. I used to have a couple of extra, let's see, like some random overlay. I should get Grok to make me some random overlays. What's that? No, that's not going to work. Oh, here we go. This is a generic overlay. Why not? I haven't used this in a while, so we'll just use this. I think I used it for like home loans or something at one time. Doesn't really matter, but it's there. So let me kill the music here real quick, just for the sake of keeping the sound even. I'll look at a chat real quick again in case anybody else shows up. Johnny Blaze, good evening. Okie Native, good evening to you. K-Shoal, good evening. And Adam Myers, good evening. Shio Gorath, hello. And yeah, anybody else listening? All right, so here we go. This thing goes on for just over 16 minutes. I don't know if I'll listen to the whole thing, but at least long enough to get the idea. And yeah, so for whatever it's worth, again, just as a preamble, I am listening to this because I'm curious, and we'll take it as it comes, as they say. But I'm already prepared. Instinctively, I'm prepared to be quite irked by what might be said, but this is part of the point of the channel. So let's see if we can learn something.
There are more than 330 million people in America.
That is statistically accurate as far as I know.
According to estimates, roughly 1.6 million of them are transgender.
I'd have to say that number is probably too high, because the definition of what counts as transgender has been so diluted over the last 10 years that it's a mini splendored thing, let's say. But okay, for the sake of argument, we'll say that over 1.5 million people in this country are transgender.
1.6 million. That's less than 1%.
That is, yes, it is less than 1%.
And while they may represent just a fraction of the population, the debate over what spaces transgender people should have access to has become a flashpoint in conversations across the country.
Yes. Well, it's not so much transgender people as it is you have a biological male or female in a place where usually either culturally or comfort level wise or legally or because of in sports, sexual dimorphism, it doesn't make any sense to have someone there because someone declaring their gender is not the same as what their gender actually is. That's kind of the issue.
From Capitol Hill, after Delaware Democrat Sarah McBride became the first transgender person elected to Congress.
Which is completely irrelevant to one's ability to either govern or legislate.
If McBride wants to go to the gym, she can go to Planet Fitness, where they allow biological men to be around and in a room in a private space with underage girls. Like, no, thank you.
To college campuses.
Boise State University says it's going to be forfeiting tomorrow's semifinal match against San Jose State University.
Oh, yeah, we covered that story a couple of times now.
Over reports of a transgender player on the roster.
It's the 7th time this year a team has boycotted a match against San Jose State. Neither the university or the player in question have commented publicly on the player's gender.
Why not? I mean, it's a girls' team, right? So what's there to be controversial?
What's more, 26 states have passed laws banning what is considered medically necessary health care for trans youth.
Considered by whom?
For people in need of that gender-affirming health care.
Okay. Okay. Let me also clarify something. One of the line for me on this entire deal when it comes to the medical procedures, bathrooms and sports are their own arguments. When it comes to the medical procedures, they're talking in generalities, but my main concern, in fact, my only real concern, is when it comes to underage minors who cannot consent legally to anything else that would drastically change their life, their makeup, their physicality, elective surgery, and so on. Has nothing to do with grown adults who are fully aware of the consequences and are of legal age and everything else. So I don't know if CNN is trying to bury the lead here or if they will continue to do so. But when it comes to the whole medical procedure part of it, if you're a grown adult and you've gone through the appropriate introspection and psychological screening or whatever else is necessary, and this is what you want to do, have at it. On that level, I'm relatively libertarian. But if you are under the age of 18, no, nada, And especially when they're trying to aim this particularly at children who are not quite at puberty yet. That part just so creepy to me. But okay, anyway, just want to make that clear. I'm not disparaging anybody who wants to do this and they're completely of sound mind and of legal age. But that being said,
this isn't up for debate. Advocates say it can be a matter of life and death.
Yeah, except that it's not. And well, let me put it this way. The arguments that specifically hormone replacement therapy is a preventative to, let's say, self-deletion for the sake of YouTube, has been shown not to be so. And the studies that showed that not to be so were being actively suppressed previously. I did a stream on this. It's out there. You can look it up. They were actively suppressed by some activist physicians and officials about it. So, but that information came out like 2 or 3 weeks ago. I'm curious if they'll bring that up here. Probably not.
And now, the question of whether one of those bans should remain in place has arrived at the highest court in the land.
Right. I don't know if this music is going to get me in trouble, so I'm going to break it up every couple of seconds.
My guest is CNN senior writer Chelsea Bailey. She has the story of the transgender lawyer who is set to make history in front of the Supreme Court.
Yeah. History for, just like with so many other things that are supposedly historic, a non-determinative factor of someone's makeup. But anyway.
From CNN, this is One Thing. I'm David Rind.
This is One Thing? I should come up with a catchy podcast name like Living on Borrowed Crime or something. That's probably too many syllables.
Chelsea, what is this case the Supreme Court is scheduled to hear on Wednesday?
I remember, just as a note, in case you missed the opening, this took place last week or before last Wednesday. Last Wednesday was when the oral arguments on this case took place before the Supreme Court. So this is a week behind that, effectively.
Yeah, so this is one of the most high-profile disputes on the docket this session. The case is called U.S. versus Scrimetti, and it challenges a Tennessee law that bans treatments like hormone therapy and puberty blockers for transgender minors.
Okay, so the case is explicitly about treatment for minors, right? Okay, so just keep that in mind. CNN was talking in high-minded terms about things. We're talking explicitly about things affecting children. That's what the ban is on.
And it also imposes civil penalties on doctors who violate the law and provide the treatment anyway. So the justices will decide whether Tennessee's ban on gender-affirming care violates the Constitution's Equal Protection Clause.
Violates Equal Protection Clause. Okay. Sorry, I'm just thinking for a moment here. I'm trying to think if there's any, because not being a legal expert or anything, I'm trying to think of anything else that affects children that is different than, say, an adult, and whether that violates the Equal Protection Clause. The first thing that comes to my mind, and I don't even know if this is applicable, okay, but I just try to think of things that children are not allowed to do that adults are allowed to do. Work full-time. Right? I mean, if a child can't be forced to work full-time, and there are certain regulations, either federally or state to state, on work hours for children, right? Or anybody under a certain age or whatever. I always hear about that for in movies and TV shows when they have child actors, there's only so many hours a day that they're allowed to work. So does that at all, and I'm asking rhetorically because I don't know, but I'm just trying to think of like a parallel here. Does that at all carry over to the same idea of having a child go through a procedure or something that in all other instances would require a consenting adult to agree to? Especially when it comes to surgery, like actual going under the scalpel kind of stuff.
And if they do decide that it violates the Constitution, it could mean that any law targeting trans people is unconstitutional and discriminatory.
It could, but this one explicitly talks about, children. So, thank you, Dead Man. If you threaten to self-delete if you don't get your way, then you definitely should not get hormone therapy. That's also an argument there. I mean, there's other things going on there. Yeah, and it's I get all kind of like icky on the inside when I'm even thinking about this kind of stuff because it's just so important. Oh, but now I feel better because Miranda Stone's here. You guys know about Miranda Stone, don't you? Well, let me tell you about Miranda Stone. Yes, indeed. All hail the Queen. Queen of the Discords. Okay, anyway. And apologies for anybody who's new here, maybe listening on X or something else. I do have to pause occasionally as a matter of course because YouTube. So I'll try to have something interesting to say or to interfere with, but I do have to do it on occasion just as a matter of course.
A ruling along those lines would give civil rights lawyers a way to fight anti-trans laws like bathroom bans and bans on trans people playing school sports. But a ruling that allows the Tennessee ban to stand could clear the way for states to pass other laws.
Right. Depending. It depends on how narrow or broad the court's ruling eventually is.
Targeting trans folks.
So this could really shape the way this all kind of moves forward.
Targeting trans... Again, And this came up in the oral arguments, and I don't know if CNN will bring it up. One of the questions that the justices put before the lawyer we're about to hear from is being transgender an immutable element of someone's makeup? And I'm paraphrasing slightly. Because one of the dividing lines here when it comes to the Equal Protection Clause and a bunch of other parts of the Constitution is someone can't change their race, right? Someone can't change their country of origin. Someone can't change their gender on the literal level. So is being transgender a permanent, immutable element of someone's makeup? If you make a law for something that someone can just change their mind on the next day, does it have any permanency? Does it make any sense to try to rule in one way, shape, or form for an element of someone's makeup that is effectively ephemeral in a way? That's the difficult question. Or it's not. But it was difficult for the lawyer when they asked it.
When we hear about gender affirming care, I know that's like a term that gets thrown around when we're talking about this issue. But can you just describe the arguments on both sides for why trans people say they need this care and why the other side is trying to restrict it in the way that they have, like in Tennessee?
No. Children. Okay, in this particular case and instance, the most important part here is underage, non-consensual children. They can't sign a contract. They can't drive a car. They can't go to war. We're talking about underage children here.
Yeah, so gender affirming care has become a really big fault line maybe in our culture war lately.
These children do not need these medical procedures as children to be able to flourish as adults.
Okay, well, at least the person that they're quoting there has gotten it right.
The Republican lawmakers who are passing these bans usually frame it as they're trying to protect kids.
Yes.
In most circumstances, quite frankly, they just need time to develop through adolescence so that they can be the healthy, happy adult that they were designed to be.
So they say that, kids aren't allowed to make big life-changing decisions like, having sex underage or when they get married.
Or getting a tattoo, or driving a car, or signing legal contracts, all those other things.
Until they're adults.
Yeah.
And they view these laws as similar, that they're trying to protect kids from making life-changing decisions.
Like once you reach a certain age, then you can go ahead and have these kind of procedures. But when you're underage like this, it's just too young.
Putting it simply, yes.
Yes, that would be part of the argument that some of these lawmakers have put forward. But parents and advocates for trans children in particular say that the earlier you can get this health care, the better.
Okay. Here's part of the question I've always had. How does a child whose brain has not yet fully developed, or at least isn't on the way to fully developing at the ages that they're talking about, how does a child know, how can they affirm, how can they articulate to anyone else in the world that they do have gender dysphoria? That's the part, setting everything else aside, how does any advocate or adult effectively argue that a still developing child can make any definitive statement about their psychology, their perspective on the world, the totality of their experiences, when their brain has not yet fully developed, their body has not yet fully developed? There's a whole bunch of other stuff that might happen in between. Of all the things, and this is the exact same argument for anything else that involves a legal consenting adult versus a child. So why is this so difficult to understand? That's the part that I just don't get. And I'm setting aside whatever might be the misguided or insidious motivations of the adults, quote unquote, in the room on these subjects. But just looking at the brass tacks of why we have a separation between legal age for things and not legal age for things in the first place.
And it's medically necessary to actually provide this health care.
They've been legislating all kinds of things that are relevant to the field of medicine without being doctors themselves. And
I'm not a doctor, right? But if some 12-year-old said, I want to get my leg cut off tomorrow because I don't think it's really my leg, do I just assent to the child's interpretation of reality because the kid said so? How is that functionally or mechanically any different than what's being advocated for here?
And a lot of times without speaking to experts in the field that they're legislating, and that's dangerous.
For people experiencing gender dysphoria, which is when your gender identity does not align with your sex that you were assigned at birth.
Oh, jeez. Assigned at birth. No. Gender dysphoria is a psychological condition where you feel as though you are not your biological gender. You are the opposite gender. Not assigned at birth. It's not a coin flip or something. The doctors and the nurses did not have a blue and pink dartboard in the delivery room and upon the birth of the child just said, and throw a dart. That phrase drives me absolutely up the wall. But thanks, CNN. Thanks, CNN.
It can be really traumatizing. It can cause a lot of anxiety. And research shows that the risk for suicide among people who are experiencing this is actually really high.
How does a child know that they have such a complex psychological condition with any certitude that an adult on the outside could say, yeah, I guess you're okay to do this potentially permanent damage to your body?
So parents are saying that it's in the best interest of my child to provide gender-affirming care so that they can live as authentically themselves as possible.
I understand that the CNN reporter here is just relaying the arguments from either side. This isn't me being like trying to dump on her specifically. It's just this is where I've stood on these things for a long time. Keeverdam, thank you so much for the gift of bone. I'll just let that.
Wowie, wow, wow.
The Dog Cat Fox gift of bone. Thank you, Keeverdam. Appreciate it very much. Hope you're having a good evening. Also, hello, Blitz Zero. Hello, Peter. Anybody else that I spot while I scroll up briefly? I don't see anyone else, so good evening. Oh, Adam Myers, did I already say hello? If not, hello. All right.
When they make those arguments, they often cite major medical associations like the American Medical Association and the American Academy of Pediatrics, and all of these medical associations have said gender-affirming care is appropriate.
For children?
Even for children who...
Even for children. I do not trust these institutions.
Who are underage. But they also kind of view this as a violation of, their ability to make decisions as parents for what's best for their kids.
The parents say, if I want my kid to have this procedure or get puberty blockers, they should be able to.
I think they would say, I've made this decision in consultation with doctors and my child. We have worked together to determine that this is the best way forward for my child.
Okay, so what about a parent who constantly puts their child through unnecessary medical tests and procedures because they say that their child is ill? Can we think of any examples in recent history where a parent has put their child through medical trauma unnecessarily? And is that just acceptable in and of itself? Can we think of any instances where that's found out to be a criminal in nature? Well, and Assassin the Gray has the right of it here. It's called Munchausen by proxy for a reason. At least that has to be considered. If you're going to consider, on the one hand, that it's perfectly reasonable and everything else, you have to be able to consider, on the other hand, that it's not. So, is there any consideration of having to require psychological screening of the parents or guardians of children who are attempting to go through this at all? I mean, I don't want to open up any doors for the possibility myself, but it might be something to consider, since the child cannot consent of themselves.
I should be able to make that decision without the government weighing in.
Mm-hmm.
So the case has finally made its way to Supreme Court. It could have very huge implications for people on both sides and could truly change the lives of trans folks living here in the United States.
You mean this particular case is regarding children? Can we focus on that one and not generalize? Can you do that?
Including the life of the lawyer who is arguing the case.
Why? The lawyer who's arguing the case is a full-grown adult. How does this case affect, or how would this case affect this lawyer, I guess is the question. Holy cats, Keeverdam, thank you again. Fundraisers in chat. Oh, thank you, Keeverdam. Apologies. I get horse blinders on when I'm like doing this sometimes. I get so focused, I'm like, sort of growling at the screen or something. Thank you so much. That's very generous of you, Keeverdam. Thank you. Yes, everybody, and thank you, Keeverdam. At the top of the chat box, there's a link there for the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society. This is my preferred charity for several reasons. Not only because my father was recently diagnosed with leukemia earlier this year. He was not expected to still be alive at this point. So good on him. Knock Formica, crossed fingers that stays true for a long time more. But I also in the past had a friend who, much, much younger than my father, around 22 years old, pass away from leukemia. And so it's been kind of a personal nemesis of mine in the abstract. And perhaps more so now that I'm reminded that it runs in my family. So, if you can donate, please do so. But even if you can't, share that out on social media, that'd be appreciated. Also, just again to remind, I'm simulcasting on X. So if you're on X or can watch this on X or are able to send a hello from X, thanks. Also, Old Guy Gamer, good evening. Hope you're doing well. All right, so, yes, this could affect the lawyer. I'm curious to know how, since it's a ban on surgery for minors, and the lawyer is a full-grown adult, but okay.
Huh, what do you mean by that?
Yes.
Yeah, so the lawyer who will be presenting the case for the ACLU alongside the Biden administration is a transgender man.
And that doesn't mean anything about how this is going to affect the transgender man or the woman.
His name is Chase Strangio.
Chase Strangio? I don't think I heard the lawyer's name before. Okay.
I don't know. I mean, like, how have you been? How's it going so far, I guess, since last week?
So I'm sort of keeping my head down, focusing on December 4th. So
Chase is a lawyer with the ACLU. He's actually been at the center of a lot of our really big cases for LGBTQ rights.
Who's speaking?
Over the last decade or so. So he was a lawyer on the case that gave us marriage equality. He was a lawyer on a recent case that ruled discriminating against LGBTQ people at work is unconstitutional.
I've been litigating these cases since 2021 when Arkansas first passed a medical care ban for trans adolescents. And it's been a really big part of my life. It's been a meaningful part of my life to be.
Yeah, okay, but we're talking about children. I want to get to the part where somehow it's rationalized that this makes sense to be done to children.
Be able to be a part of the challenge to these laws that obviously have such devastating impacts for my community. And then
but this will be the first time that a trans person has ever argued in front of the Supreme Court.
And that's so what? The lawyer could be 7 feet tall. This is the first time that a giant has argued before the Supreme Court. Here's the thing. Here's the funny part about arguments for the Supreme Court. What matters is the argumentation, not the mouth it is coming out of.
And Chase will be the person delivering these oral arguments that are actually really personal to him.
Because he's had gender-affirming care. Like this has touched his life in a unique way.
Did he have a gender-affirming care at 12?
Yes. When I had a chance to talk to him, he was really clear-eyed about that. He said, it's not lost on me that I'm able to stand here as my authentic self because of gender-affirming care.
Okay, which this person was able to get at a consenting age, correct? So what's the argument?
So I think this case is both a bit of him fighting for up-and-coming generations and also him fighting for himself.
Did you always know you wanted to be a lawyer, or, some little kids dream about that? Was that something you always thought about?
No, it wasn't. I mean,
So something I thought that was
Good gravy. Could you let the person answer a question you asked for cutting in again? Is this an interview or like a clip show? Come on.
really interesting that Chase told me is that he really got into law because he was a really passionate activist.
Oh, golly gee whiz. Could you let the lawyer answer the questions instead of summarizing everything?
For his community. And he wanted a way to kind of marry his activism with a wider impact. So that's why he decided to become a lawyer.
As a younger person struggling with my own queer and transness, it was a hard place to imagine myself, especially especially in the context of something like litigation, where you are, sort of involved in a very theatrical enterprise where there is a lot of gendered roles and there are a lot of gendered expectations.
What?
And I didn't really imagine a place for myself in that work, and it's taken me time to just find my way.
Yes, because there are only lawyers and court workers. What do you... I'm going to save the WTFs for TEDx's, but just imagine if you will.
So he started at the ACLU in 2012, and I actually had a chance to talk to the person that hired him, who said he still remembered the answer that made him decide that he was going to hire Chase. Essentially, as when he was doing more activist work, Chase started an organization to help trans immigrants raise money for bail.
Okay, that's awfully granular. Trans immigrants raise money for bail. I did I think I did a TED Excellence back during the pandemic where it was the head of the ACLU, I think it was. I believe so. Yeah, that sounds about right.
And that really impressed his colleague, James Essex, who told me that he was really impressed with how Chase married his passion for activism and empathy with action. And
Empathy with action. Sure.
He wanted more of that at the ACLU.
Going backwards, sort of re-entrenching, ideas about gender that are fixed and binary and limiting for all people. I don't want that future. And so
you don't want a future limiting for all people. You don't want a future with the gender binary. That's what you're working towards? To eliminate the gender binary. Okay.
That's part of what I see the work being.
I really hope this music doesn't get me dinged somehow. Okay.
I wonder if Chase kind of sees himself at all as like the token trans person in this legal fight. Like, oh, here's a big case about transgender care. We better be sure to have a trans person involved in that somehow.
Nah, it's probably nothing. It's not symbolic. It's not to show off. It's not to make history or nothing. It's not to make it personal, like you said before. Nah, it's just how these things go. It would have been Chase regardless. I'm sure.
Does he hear any of that?
Yeah, I think that's that's obviously part of the conversation because this is so historic. And
well, yeah, and why? Come on, the answer's right in front of you. Basically just gave us the answer earlier.
And his appearance before the court is so historic, but Chase doesn't spend a lot of time thinking about that.
Press X to doubt.
And in fact, his coworkers kind of scoffed at that idea.
Press X to doubt.
They are really insistent that Chase has been at the forefront of a lot of these cases for years leading up to this, and all of that experience just makes him the right person for this
if you say so.
Very consequential case.
I'm extraordinarily used to being in environments where the conversations are, you know, are sort of framed around a lack of understanding of trans existence.
So Chase is really...
Oh, for crying out loud, CNN! Let this person speak! Good gravy! Jeez Louise, will you stop cutting in? I mean, you know, it's one of those situations where it's like, are you trying to speak for the voiceless or something here? Give voice... Just hand over the microphone and let the attorney speak in her own words. Why do you keep doing this?
Understanding of trans existence.
So Chase is really stepping into history at this kind of toxic time in our culture.
Yeah, concern over small children being taken advantage of by crazy adults. Yeah, that's, boy, oh boy, I can't think of anything more toxic short of an Avenger.
Honestly, around transgender people. And, you know, he's stepping into the spotlight at this time. And
children. And it's not like it's a different species or something. We're talking about children who have no idea what it actually means to be transgender. You are not going to convince me that a prepubescent child has either the developed mind, perspective, knowledge, or introspection to even classify themselves under the demographic of transgender. It is a child. That's it. Ugh.
That's had consequences on his life.
If we cede the narrative terrain to people who have ideas about us that are not informed by anything other than misinformation or animus, and that has an impact on our lives.
I don't have any animus against a grown adult that wants to do something of their own accord, as long as they're not hurting anybody else or violating anybody else's rights, and as long as they're going into whatever this decision is with their eyes wide open and they're not being coerced or manipulated or anything else, just like with anything else in life. Right? If somebody decides to get a terrible tattoo, well, they're going to have to live with it until they can afford the laser removal surgery. If a grown adult decides that for their OnlyFans channel, they're going to have relations with 100 guys in a day because that's somehow going to make them get clout, money, or attention or otherwise, as long as they weren't coerced into it, as long as they went in with their eyes open, so to speak, that's their decision. Can't promise it's going to turn out well for you, but it's your decision to do so. We're talking about a element of our society, what do you want to call it? A segment of our population that is not capable of making those decisions in an informed manner. It's got nothing to do with hatred for quote-unquote trans people. I don't hate people because of an element that says nothing about their character. Okay? I am severely concerned about adults pushing children into life and bodily altering medical procedures because it makes them feel special. Or they've convinced these children that they need this or else something bad is going to happen. So, I'm just speaking for myself here, but our lawyers' concern, our lawyers' suspicion, it's because they hate us. No, I don't hate you. I'd be inclined to not like very much, to put it mildly, any adult that tries to put a child through through an unnecessary medical procedure.
But I thought it was really interesting that he told me he's not a miserable person, despite a lot of the attacks that he gets both online and in person. He might be arguing in these court cases against people who don't think that he has the right to exist.
Doesn't have a right to exist. Okay. I got to ask because it's relevant. I don't know if we're going to get an answer. Was Chase put through these medical procedures at an age prior to that of legal consent? That's my first question. Second question, or more point, is your experience does not account for everyone else's. And that's beside the point anyway. We're talking about children.
As a trans person. And he said, you know, one of the most powerful things he can do is stand before people who feel this way and just show them that he's not miserable.
And that's one of the things
That's not the concern
that I find really powerful about being a trans person in this work is, you know, I'm deposing experts whose entire theory of transness is that it makes people miserable, but they have to be confronted with me as I am like distinctly not a miserable person.
And every decision made by every person has an exact same outcome. But that's not what we're arguing here. Were you a full-fledged, grown, consenting, legal adult when you decided to go through the procedures that altered your body? Yes or no?
Right.
And I don't approach this work from a place of being downtrodden despite all of this.
I am doubtful of that claim.
And so I want that confrontation to happen in the discourse, in the culture, and in all of our legal advocacy.
That this gender affirming care actually gives people the chance to live.
Stop saying people. Okay, you're being far too general here. What is the case about? You can speculate as to the ramifications of its affirmation or denial by the court or whatever else, but this particular case is about who in our society? CNN, I don't know what I expected. I thought, oh boy.
Their best life.
It unlocked something totally new and positive for him, when on the other side you hear some lawmakers saying like this is dangerous and it'll actually make people more depressed. Or
you know, I've known since at least 2016, when I really started paying attention to CNN copy a lot for Lords of the Night. Actually, I guess it was more 2017. Either way, CNN is a propaganda machine. Absolute propaganda machine. Where is the objectivity here? Is anybody going to confront this lawyer with a reasoned, not hyperbolic version of the argument in objection to this entire thing at all? Are you going to bring up the fact that we're talking about children? You keep saying people. It's the same sort of trick they play when they're talking about immigration, and they just talk about immigrants, and they never distinguish between legal and illegal.
That kind of thing.
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the arguments is that providing this care comes with a lot of regret, and that people somewhere down the line are miserable.
Well, okay. Are there any examples? Are there any examples of regret? Are there any examples of people who are attempting to detransition? Are there any examples of people who have tragically done something to themselves after they have received this care? Because here's the thing. If there's a single example of someone having a bad experience as a result of this, that is as relevant as this one lawyer saying, I'm perfectly fine, everyone. So you want to address that?
And Chase was really emphatic that, you know, he said, I'm not a miserable person.
It's not about it's not about you. It's not about just you. You, and I'm speaking about the lawyer here on behalf of the CNN person who's speaking for the lawyer here, you are not the center of all things. CNN, do you have, and I could point you to Benjamin Boyce on YouTube. If you guys don't know about Benjamin Boyce, check out Benjamin Boyce's channel. He's been looking at this subject for years and years now. There's a whole series of interviews he's done on this subject. But anyway, I would definitely recommend CNN talk to Benjamin Boyce, or have Benjamin Boyce link them up with any of his previous guests about this subject. This lawyer's individual experience is irrelevant. Chase is not the end-all, be-all. But apparently Chase thinks she's the end-all, be-all.
Chase was really emphatic that, he said, I'm not a miserable person. I'm happy. And most of the trans people I know are also happy.
Oh, okay. And then your rejoinder was, has anyone ever been unhappy? Are there any examples of that?
When they're able to live authentically as themselves.
Authentically,
Well, so clearly he's personally invested in the outcome here in a way that most lawyers who come to the Supreme Court aren't.
Yeah, so it's almost like maybe they're a bit biased. Maybe they can't be objective. Are you... There's only 3 minutes left in this thing. Are you guys going to say anything to the contrary of this?
But beyond the courtroom, how is the wider trans community preparing for whatever the justices may decide here?
Oh, for crying out loud. This is, just like with listening to a TEDx talk or something, I've got the argumentative or the persuasive essay structure in my mind. You don't bring these things up and not at least give voice to the contrary. Or at least confront your interviewee with a challenge. And it's like, well, your experience might be one thing, but there are examples of, people who've gone through these procedures, both minors and adults, that have had not so great outcomes. What do you say to that? I'm not even a professional journalist or something, but anyway.
Yeah, it's a really good question.
Yeah.
I spent the last few weeks talking to trans folks across the country, and to be honest, a lot of them are scared.
There are some places your boy leaves the school, comes back a girl.
Well, have you looked at some of the policies in many school districts when it comes to keeping secret some child's declaration of their gender after they've been pitched gender dysphoria by activist teachers? I don't know if you know that's a thing that's been going on for the last several years, CNN.
Okay? Without parental consent.
Yeah.
What is that all about?
Yeah, okay, CNN. Are you going to address that at all?
We're also coming out of an election season that Republicans and the Trump campaign really pushed this transgender narrative.
Wait. Who's pushing a transgender narrative? What? Oh, this is painful. I mean, my expectations for this were relatively low because it's CNN, but holy cow. I mean, CNN would have to look up to see a slug as low as their standards are on this.
Kamala even supports letting biological men compete against our girls in their sports.
Yeah.
Kamala is for they, them.
Yeah.
President Trump is for you.
Well, you didn't play the relevant piece of footage from Kamala Harris saying in no uncertain terms that she was going to use taxpayer money to fund gender-affirming care for prisoners and illegal immigrants. Interesting you leave that part out.
And I think that that's really just kind of heightened anxiety among a lot of people in the trans community.
Okay, tell me where there is a law being passed or otherwise that says that a grown adult, consenting adult, cannot receive these treatments or surgeries if they so choose. Okay, because here's the thing. If there was such a law being proposed or a ban being put in place, I mean, I'd want to hear the argument for it, but from a 30,000-foot level, I'd say no. If you are a fully informed, consenting adult and you want to do this, you feel it's the right thing for you to do, this is going to make you feel better about yourself and so on, fine. I like I say, I guess I'm fairly libertarian on that subject, on that concept. But until you tell me that that is what is being proposed here, and not a ban on doing unnecessary and experimental medical procedures on children, which you don't want to seem to clarify, then yeah, no, I'm more than skeptical, to put it mildly.
I talked to a mom who was really frank when she told me, we were not happy when the Supreme Court agreed to take up this case because the decision, the ruling and the precedent could be so final.
Welcome to the wonderful world?
For her.
For her. Mm-hmm.
She's a mom in Tennessee, and she's already kind of planning contingencies.
Planning contingencies to perform medical experiments on her child?
She takes her daughter to California to get her gender-affirming care.
Her son?
Because of Tennessee's ban.
Wow.
Wow. That is, yeah.
And, she's a lifelong Tennessee resident, but she's considering moving out of the state.
Oh my gosh. Running away from the law to continue doing things to your children that a state says are illegal.
To another part of the country where she can get the care that she needs for her daughter.
She can get the care that she needs for her daughter. Just look up the case of Lacey Spears. I know. God, that's such a drastic comparison. Obviously, it makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. I don't even know why I'm bringing it up. I don't even know why I'm bringing it up.
Yeah, and this idea of having to travel out of state for the care is obviously a big fear, big cost that could be exacerbated depending on what this ruling actually is. Again, the ruling may not come until the end of the court's term in June, so it might be a couple months, but we'll see what happens. Chelsea, thank you so much.
That's it? Wait, that's it? Okay. I wanted to hear from the lawyer. I wanted to hear from the lawyer on this. I wanted to hear more about the argument in favor of this, the justifications and so on. I guess the only remedy to that would be to actually listen to the oral arguments themselves, which would take hours, and I'm not prepared to do tonight. And I don't even know if anybody's interested in even going over that. So you guys will have to let me know. The Dead Man, thank you again so much. They make the argument that kids should keep secrets from parents because parents might be against these procedures. Yeah, parental interference in the welfare of a student. The school has some moral obligation to keep secret declarations from children about their orientation or gender identity. That this is some kind of privacy thing that the schools have to adhere to against the parents. Thank you, Dead Man. Yeah, this was the quote-unquote don't say gay bill in Florida, as it was branded, except it was a parental rights bill. It was about the parental rights to know what's going on with their own children in a school, and that a school teacher does not somehow have overriding authority over what information is and is not provided to parents. It's scary. It's creepy. It's weird. Cultish. There's a whole bunch of other words I could use. But is that really the end of this? There's still like a minute left in this thing, or is it just going to be an advertisement for their next episode?
Yeah, thank you.
Is that it? Anything else? That it? Or is it just like a minute of dead air? Okay, anything?
One Thing is a production of CNN.
Okay, I don't care. All right, well, there you go. That was the... I was promised more than was received by CNN, if you can believe it. Yeah, so that was the very, very truncated, non-informative, quote-unquote, interview with the first trans lawyer to appear in front of the Supreme Court. The oral arguments I listened to a little bit of it when it was happening live. I didn't catch the whole thing. So I guess the question is, if anybody would be interested, because it would be kind of an arduous task. And I'm pretty sure I can get away with playing segments of that longer than I could a CNN thing, because it's the Supreme Court and sort of like public information and so on. I think, I don't think the Supreme Court could copyright claim me. I don't know. But if you guys would be interested in listening to, or having me, go along with listening to, as a commentator, the oral arguments in front of the Supreme Court regarding this case from the lawyer in question, I might be willing to do it, say, on a Saturday or something with some extra time. But you guys let me know in the comments, or over on X, or over on the Discord server. Do you guys know I have a Discord server? Well, here's the thing. I have a Discord server. Occasionally, I talk on it. Well, at least I try to say good morning and good night every day. But if you'd like to join the Discord server, there's a link in the chat over on YouTube right now. Sorry for those of you on X. You'll have to pop in real quick, or just know this, that if you come to the Discord server, you have to say the secret word to become a member of the Discord server. The secret word tells me you're not a bot, have actually watched, or in this case, listened to the stream, and if thus are in the right, the privilege, the entitlement to join the Discord server. And today's secret word is incomplete. There we go. Yes, just say hello, incomplete, and I'll know that you watched the show, because this was anything but a complete interview with an individual that I was at least morbidly curious to hear their justification and arguments for things, but I guess that would happen in front of the Supreme Court. Beyond that, tomorrow night, Thursday night, 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern, will be TED Excellence, where I'll take a look at another off-brand TED Talk. Well, actually, no, I take it back. This time it's an actual TED Talk. I know, it's crazy. I'm going to watch an actual TED Talk. And the subject matter of the TED Talk is I guess you'd say she's a politician in training, or a current politician. I'm not quite sure, but this is the thumbnail for tomorrow night's show. Friend or foe? According to our speaker, a deep fake of some kind, I don't know what kind, almost destroyed her political career. And so for the sake of that, my curiosity, morbid and otherwise, we're going to watch that tomorrow night, 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern, with bingo. I'll put out the poll for the bingo card tomorrow morning, so keep an eye out for that, both on X and the Discord server when the time comes. But with that, everyone, thank you so much for joining me. Let me know what you thought about this in the comments below. Leave a like on the way out if you would. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Follow me on X, scribe_light. Anything else I got to do for housekeeping here? Oh, I have a merch store. If you want a TED Excellence mug, or like a Pepperjack t-shirt or something, all that stuff's in the description below. But again, thank you for joining me on this ambush stream on a Wednesday night. Moderators, thank you for keeping an eye on things, even though everyone here is so well behaved. You have very, very little to do. Everybody who donated, holy cats, thank you so much for your generosity, whether it's to me or to the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society link at the top of the chat box. Everyone, have a good rest of your Wednesday. Hope to see you tomorrow on Thursday. I hope you're all safe and well. If you're not well, please get well soon, and I'll see you on the next one. Take care.